The United States has issued an ultimatum to Iran. By the end of the day, they must promise to stop attacking vessels passing through the strait. Will Iran agree? If they don't, they'll face what's called unforeseeable consequences. So the U.S. has made a very serious threat. Will Iran respond today? Before they do, I'll give a response to the U.S. on their behalf, see if I'm right or wrong, along with my analysis of this response. All right. Also, a famous young American investigative journalist, Nick Shirley, went into the Chinese community. He went to Flushing, Queens, in New York to investigate the scale of what's known as adult care fraud there. How deep is our Chinese community involved? This is the major breaking news I'm bringing you today, and it's really relevant to us Chinese people. All right, welcome to Good Morning America with Fang Wei. Hello to our YouTube viewers, and hello to our listeners on Sound of Hope Silicon Valley, FM 96.1. All right, now let's get straight to the point. We're talking about Iran, which last week attacked commercial shipping in the Strait of Hormuz, hitting 3 merchant ships and tankers. This prompted the U.S. to resume military punitive actions, conducting 3 rounds of strikes against Iran, hitting at least 170 targets in total. U.S. officials said that Iran privately told Washington the attacks were carried out by a rogue element within its system, meaning they couldn't control their own people. All right. That being the case, President Trump gave Iran a deadline until yesterday, demanding that Iranian authorities publicly promise to stop attacks on commercial shipping in the Strait of Hormuz. Otherwise, they will face serious consequences. Okay, then after about half a day, the U.S. took a step back, saying they hope Iran will clearly, or at least implicitly, acknowledge that the recent attacks on ships were a mistake. Okay, so basically, Trump gave Iran a deadline, a cutoff point. So regarding the ultimatum, will Iran make such a promise? Do you think they will? Let's talk about it. If you think they will, right will. If not, right won't, okay? We can also run a poll. Will Iran make such a promise? I think 100% they won't. And this is what I believe is the gap in President Trump's perception of the Iranian authorities. Do you know what Iran's latest response is? Iran's supreme leader, called Khamenei II, Khamenei's son, posted a series of messages on the X platform Saturday morning, vowing to avenge his father, the former supreme leader of Iran, Khamenei. In the past week, under the very dignified tolerance of the U.S., which didn't launch any strikes, Iran held a massive nationwide state funeral in the streets. Iranian state media reported that over 40 million people attended the week-long funeral. Of course, whether it's 40 million or not, they just say whatever they want. But Khamenei II said this. He said, "We promise to avenge you," meaning his father, "to take revenge on the evil and shameful killers. This is the revenge our country demands." This task must be completed with absolute determination. So, as you can see, the gap between the two sides is just massive. On one hand, Iran is being given a respectful space to hold these public funerals. But at those funerals, they're calling for Trump's death, vowing absolute revenge and saying this must be carried out. So the difference in how both sides perceive the same situation is beyond measure. They're worlds apart. Now, Trump has responded to these Iranian assassination threats by saying, Trump warned Iran that he's ordered the U.S. military to be ready to retaliate if there's any attempt on his life. He said if an assassination attempt were to succeed, the U.S. would completely destroy and wipe out the nation of Iran. President Trump stated that 1,000 missiles are already locked, loaded, and aimed at the Islamic Republic. So, if the Iranian regime carries out the threats they've announced worldwide to assassinate the sitting U.S. president, which is me, then we will take action, and thousands of missiles, maybe even more, will follow immediately. Trump's current strategy is basically, you hit us once, not me personally, but say a merchant ship, you hit us once, we hit you 20 times. Actually, in the first round, it was 60 times back. That's how you learn. Every strike is met with a multiplied response. This is how Trump believes he can tame a beast like Iran. However, I must say, Iran sees things very differently. They think, as long as I'm safe and you're not looking for regime change, I can stay in power. That's enough for me to keep defying you. If you attack, I'll just go underground, right? I don't care if you blow Iran to bits, because the only thing I care about is my regime. As long as I have power, I can take care of myself. No matter who starves, the leaders won't. It's like that in communist China, and it's the same in Iran. As for what happens to the people, what does that have to do with me? This is where the massive gap between the two sides lies. For Trump, his mindset, let me analyze it for you, is as a national leader, how could you not care for your country and your people? But Iran's thinking is totally different. To them, power is the state, right? Without power, there is no state. The state, to me, is power. If the regime isn't threatened, then we're fine. Nothing else matters. This is what you'd call the fundamental difference in thinking between Western liberal democracies and autocratic states. As smart as Trump is, I don't think he's an autocratic dictator. It's hard for him to imagine what an autocrat is thinking, so he has to learn gradually and work his way there. Of course, Trump holds a lot of cards right now. For instance, the rail transport routes from China and Russia to Iran have been completely cut off. And there's a massive new blockade at sea. Plus, they can't use petrodollars. Even if Iran sells oil, they can't get the money back. And so on. Meanwhile, the Israeli military has spoken. On Thursday, at an Air Force pilot graduation, the defense minister said their forces are on high alert, ready to resume operations and reclaim air superiority. Launch a third independent strike against Iran if necessary. In other words, Trump holds all the cards. You see, he has all the cards. He just can't make up his mind because he hopes the other side will surrender without a fight, to yield without battle. But will Iran yield? Right, I think it's completely impossible. But this is Trump's learning process. Sometimes I have debates with some big influencers, different opinions. Actually, there aren't different opinions. They think what Trump is doing is just wrong. I say, what's the use of just saying he's wrong, right? This is his growth process. If Trump had been a dictator, he'd probably understand what's going on. But if he had been a dictator, he wouldn't be the Trump of today, would he? He's a successful businessman who grew up in a democratic country. He has to go through these back and forth understandings of the other school. Another type of negotiating opponent, or in this case, the world's most loathsome, autocratic dictators. Only then can he know how they behave and get things done. And also, CNN, the American cable news network, has exclusively obtained satellite footage from a satellite imagery provider called Vetter satellite footage. It shows that Iran is trying to restart its nuclear facilities. Because of this Vetter satellite footage, the Department of Defense actually stopped them from releasing it for a while. But recently there was a window, so CNN rushed in to grab the footage. An investigative analysis of the footage found that from late June to early July, several nuclear and missile facilities in Iran showed new active movements, especially developments regarding the nuclear facilities. The experts brought in by CNN found that within Iran's Parchin military base, a facility called Taligan 2 showed clear signs of activity. Experts believe this place stores explosive materials used for nuclear weapons. As well as multiple impact craters left by the joint bombing by Israel and the United States in June of last year. Now, Iran is carrying out repair and reconstruction work. For all of us who understand how autocratic countries operate, especially how the CCP and Iran operate, we know this isn't surprising at all. How could Iran not, continue to develop nuclear weapons? There's no way. Nothing can stop them. Even if they sign a treaty, it won't stop them. At the same time, what about Iran's foreign minister? He's acting as a dove. Iraqi said if the U.S. gives $400 million, Iran will stop the war. Trump replied, unless you fully meet our demands, we won't give you a penny. Finally, he warned to keep the Strait of Hormuz open for Iranian navigation, open for freedom of navigation. If you can't do that, the U.S. will not hesitate to take military action again. So, although Trump hasn't made up his mind to, end the entire Iranian regime, Trump does have one advantage. He doesn't give away money easily. Some influencer friends argue with me, saying Trump will either force the strait open through war or just buy them off. I said no, he doesn't buy people off easily. Even with the MOU signed, Trump hasn't given Iran a cent. He met Kim Jong-un 3 times and didn't give him anything either. Trump really doesn't give away money easily. When Trump deals with the CCP, it's the CCP spending money to buy his stuff. He doesn't give money to them either. This is one of Trump's strengths. It's the advantage of a businessman because businessmen keep a tight grip on money and won't let it leak out. But regardless, this whole US-Iran thing has been going back and forth for a long time. My view remains that through this learning process, Trump will eventually realize that if the Iranian regime isn't ended, there's no way out. What if he doesn't make that decision? Wow, there's a teacher, and this teacher is called Iran, who will keep teaching him. So in a sense, I really think Iran is just asking for it. They could have survived, but they're seeking death. Let's just watch how things develop, okay? Okay, next, let's talk about today's big news, which is Nikki Shirley, a famous American investigative reporter. What did she do? She just released her massive fraud investigation into adult daycare centers in New York's Chinatown. This film was released on Nikki Shirley's X platform, totaling 53 minutes. I watched it in detail, which is why today's show is late. We all know Nikki Shirley is a very young kid in America, a conservative investigative reporter. She first went to Minnesota and released something there. How many views? 70 million views. How about that? Now, the investigation into New York's Chinatown has already reached 4 million people. So I'll retweet it later, and please everyone retweet it too. So Nikki Shirley, after finishing the investigation in Minnesota, went to California. Now she's in New York, in Flushing, Queens. Okay, so what are the highlights of the whole 53 minutes? I'll briefly explain it to you in Chinese, but it's still very worth watching because there are many details in it, right? It's basically her confronting and questioning people on the spot and how they push back, how they stall, how they dodge, and even how they threaten her. It's all in there. Very interesting. A very interesting reality show. Okay, let's talk about it. Basically, it's this so-called large-scale adult daycare industry in New York. On the streets of New York, they're literally row after row. You can see 12 of them in one block. Okay, so in 2024, these businesses across New York State applied to the government for $2.5 billion in funding. $2,100 million was spent in Flushing, Queens, New York. It's all spent right here. So the largest share of new job growth in all of New York State is in adult daycare center jobs. To put it bluntly, they're all fake jobs. Okay, the key here is this. New York City has ample subsidies for the adult daycare industry, plus the durable medical equipment industry, plus transportation for patients. 1/3 of this is funded by New York State and 2/3 by the federal government. That is to say, no matter where you live, 2/3 of this comes from the taxes you pay. It's not just New York wasting money on its own people. 2/3 is taken from the federal government. So how exactly do they do it? These so-called adult daycare centers just find a building, set up a center, and then find seniors. Then, based on the seniors' Social Security numbers, they apply to the federal government for daycare funding. It ranges from $800 to $1,600 per person. So how do the seniors come? How do you get them to come? You give them kickbacks because they get so much money from the government. Just give them a portion of that money. In other words, you come here not only for care, but you also get paid. Such a good deal exists in this world? Today in Flushing, it's happening. Okay, so that's the first issue. Using kickbacks to lure people in is fraud in itself. Second, many of those who come are healthy and full of energy. They aren't patients at all and don't need care. Why wouldn't they come? Because there's money to be had. Why not come if you get paid? That's the second layer of fraud. Third, once they arrive, there's no actual care. Everyone's just there playing mahjong, chess, drinking coffee, and practicing Tai Chi. They could totally do all that at home. Now, the New York State government pays 1/3, and the federal government pays 2/3. That's how the United States national debt is created. The government pays for them to play mahjong, chess, and practice Tai Chi. This sounds like communism. Even in a communist society, things aren't this good. That's the third layer of fraud. Fourth, after arriving, a center, well, they actually have physical centers here. This one center with 200 people, they falsely reported as 7,000 to 8,000 people. So from the government, one center can get $5 million, $8 million, or even $12 million. And that's not even the biggest part. What's the biggest? I'll tell you later. So it's the Chinese community doing this, but not just them. There are also Koreans and Chinese. They've indeed set up one care center after another in Flushing. Actually, you shouldn't call them that. To be precise, they're activity centers. Coffee centers, fitness centers, not care centers. What is a care center? It's for people who can't take care of themselves. You go to this center to be looked after and ease the family's burden. That's a care center. But they're all healthy. Well, not all, but the vast majority are healthy seniors playing ping pong and drinking coffee, practicing Tai Chi, playing Mahjong. So, anyway, at least there are people inside. Back then, in the centers opened by Somalis in Minnesota, there wasn't a single person. So, they're better than the Somalis in that regard. But then, what's next? They use the head counts from these adult care centers. Using their needs as an excuse, they apply for what's called durable medical equipment subsidies. Then they get the money and buy nothing. One center alone applied for $78 million for this because durable medical equipment is very expensive. Like our seniors need it. These seniors requiring special care need this durable equipment. The federal government subsidizes 2/3 of it. Then, using the care center's needs as an excuse, they apply for transportation subsidies. Picking up and dropping off seniors. The government pays for it all. The business itself doesn't pay, the government pays. Then, if they get shut down, they immediately switch to someone else. Same place, different person, different name, different sign, another center opens. It's endless. Then, when they were questioned by Nikki Shirley, did you actually take kickbacks? Who was your boss? Why are there 7,000 people here? I only see a few small rooms. Where are the 7,000 people? They were speechless, unable to answer. There was even a moment where she asked if there were kickbacks. No kickbacks. Where are there kickbacks? Who said that? Then a senior came out, and right in front of the manager, she asked the senior, did you get a kickback? Yes, I did. Yes, they said right then and there. And the result of doing this is that it pulls seniors away from legitimate care centers. There was one legitimate care center. They lost 60% of their customers because by going elsewhere, they not only get care, but also get paid, It's like enjoying the service and getting money. What a deal. Actually, I encountered this in San Francisco. We have a viewer there. I won't mention his name, but he's great. I had dinner with him in San Francisco. He's a very hardworking small business owner who set up a home-based childcare center in his own house. He partitioned the second floor, and it was done very well. He brings kids in, takes good care of them, teaches them things, literacy, early education, and so on. He does a great job. But his competitors, other home care centers, apply for federal funding. Well, from the state, but the money comes from the feds. They apply for state funding. Do you know how much that funding is? It's enough to buy a home of their own. They buy a house and then run a home care center inside it. Now, the original logic of a home care center was to use your own home, partition it to save costs, and look after kids in the community. But now, because it's seen as such a noble cause, you can get enough money to buy a home. If you didn't have one, you use welfare to buy one, and then run the center from there. It's reached this level of absurdity. So our viewer was very angry, but he has a conscience. He said he's under immense competitive pressure because they have zero costs. Even their homes are provided by the government. But he still runs an honest business. Xintian and I encouraged him to keep doing that because in the long run, they can't outrun you. You're the one truly making the kids and parents happy. So they'll have repeat customers, and he indeed does. But such honest small businesses face massive competition. Unfair competition. This is happening in San Francisco, so it's not just New York. I think Nick Shirley should visit San Francisco. Okay, moving on. The fourth impact is that this government money is used to hire all sorts of unnecessary caregivers. All kinds of people, including transport drivers and so on. These caregivers are unionizing and forming a political force. These unions then donate to the government, as do these care centers, to keep them in office and maintain this criminal cycle. Isn't that scary? So all along, Nick Shirley was being chased away by people. Because they'd ask, who are you? And he'd say, I'm Nick Shirley. What organization are you with? I'm just an individual. He doesn't brag or deceive anyone, so he was just shooed away, even had the police called on him. But in the latter half, he brought in Dr. Oz to investigate with him. Who is Dr. Oz? He was originally a doctor, right? The one in the suit on the left? Later, he ran for the Senate in Pennsylvania. After Trump won, he was appointed as the administrator of the Centers for Medicare and Medicaid Services, CMS. That's a high-ranking federal official. He travels with his own security detail. When he showed up with Nick Shirley, did they dare to chase them away? They didn't dare to anymore. As a result, when questioned, they were completely tongue-tied. They asked, how many people are in the center every day? And the manager on duty just couldn't say. He told me, I have a phone. And well, I don't really know about that. Who's your boss? Who's the owner? I don't know. Even who the manager is, they don't know. Then, when asked when they started, they all said within the last month. So literally everyone started just this past month. This suggests that after Nick Shirley's investigation, word got around and they fired everyone who knew the truth. Is that possible? Replacing them with a bunch of new hires who just started and claim to know absolutely nothing? Maybe to prevent leaks? Now, Dr. Oz also mentioned he told Nick Shirley that it's even worse than you think. He said Flushing is actually the hub for human trafficking on the East Coast. So these nursing centers here, you can't arrest them all or shut them all down. Because once one is closed, someone else pops up in the same spot. A new boss sets it right back up. So he said, I can only conclude there's a big boss behind the scenes, someone higher up. It's not like you just catch the owner, give them a warning or a fine, and they disappear. Someone else takes over immediately. So he suspects there are major bosses behind this, using these centers not just to defraud the government, but also for money laundering and other criminal activities, even potentially sending money to hostile foreign governments. Otherwise, where is all that money going? $2.1 billion, all within the small area of Flushing. So, I don't know how you all feel hearing this. Everything I'm telling you is the truth. How does it make you feel? So we always talk about Somalis doing this or that, but Chinese people are just as involved. All of these incidents are tarnishing the reputation of the Chinese community. The CCP uses its spies. They keep ruining our reputation, and then Chinese people ruin it themselves. What will be left of our name? I truly believe, and I'm not trying to make this a racial issue, that the Chinese are a very unique group. We come from under the CCP, and America is our sanctuary. We're also under a cloud of suspicion. Who knows where our true loyalty lies? That's why I believe that once we're here, Chinese people in America should truly cherish this country. Because we know a country like this is hard to come by. We should cherish America even more than Americans do. They might take it for granted, thinking the world has always been this way, but we know better. At the very least, in America, if you work hard, you can actually build wealth. Second, once you're wealthy, that wealth belongs to you, right? Is that true in China? Jack Ma worked hard and got rich, but then what? Was that wealth really his? Not to mention, many people work hard there but have no way to get ahead. We Chinese are naturally hardworking and frugal. We're good at saving. We can have a wonderful life here in America as long as we remain diligent, frugal, and disciplined. If we just stick to our strengths, we'll be fine. Why wouldn't we cherish America? Why would we want to ruin it? If America falls, our children will end up under the CCP's thumb. How tragic would that be? I actually discussed this yesterday on Ganjing World. I was talking with Hang He and Liao Xiaocheng, and it really hit home. When it comes to the CCP, those two really understand the inner workings of their top leadership. Hearing this makes me sigh. I've been away from China for a long time. I left over 30 years ago. So I just listen to others and ask questions. But as you dig deeper, you feel the absurdity of the CCP's China. The absurdity of only caring about power. China's in deep water and fire. Guangxi is underwater. And Xinjiang, Fujian is burning. These are man-made disasters. It's not nature, it's man-made. We don't have this in America. I'll discuss U.S. floods in a bit. So, if we don't cherish America and let it rot, if we just take advantage and ruin it, then our children will end up in a communist America. A communist America.